What's happening, everybody? Welcome back to World of Warships with Tuffy the Great. So, in my previous video, we unveiled the Nassau Tier 3 German battleship. We kind of explained the battleship line and how that whole thing works. So today what we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about this little thing, I want to say beauty, but the couple of games that I've played with it, I'm not going to lie to you, it's not my favorite ship so far. And I'll explain to you why that is. So the reason, the Tier 4 German battleship is the Kaiser, and it's kind of an odd little duck. It's got 5 turrets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, right? But the way it's got these laid out is it's got 1 on both the port and the starboard side, as well as 2 aft and 1 forward. And this one, if you are facing, say we're facing our firing arc to the port over here towards the harbor, this starboard side gun here will actually swing all the way around and point that way. So we actually get 5 guns pointed in the same direction, which is kind of cool, right? But here's the problem. Its turret traversal speed is really slow. In fact, if you go to the artillery and you look at the main battery guns, its 180-degree turn time is a minute, 60 seconds, right? So that can kind of pose just a little bit of a problem. It looks like there's supposed to be some lifeboats up here on top of the turrets there, but it doesn't look like they have anything. So that's kind of a problem. It takes an entire minute for the guns to go from completely port to completely starboard. It takes forever. So a lot of times, like the forward turret here will, it's pretty quick to traverse back and forth, but to get this thing to swing all the way around, the way the 2 guns have to swing, it kind of takes forever. So battleships, the big problem that you have with battleships is you don't want to sail in a straight line, because if you sail in a straight line, you're gigantic torpedo magnets. Destroyers and carriers love battleship players who just sail in straight lines. So believe it or not, you actually have to try to keep this gigantic, school bus on ice skates mobile, and you have to try to keep it turning. But when you have to go from one side to the other, if you're traveling due north and you have to turn around and go due south, and you can't even get your guns to swing around by the time you're ready to put fire on target, it kind of poses a big problem. But, I mean, it's got some pretty decent armor. We'll go over all the stats of it here in just a second. But, like I said, I've only played a couple of games with it, so I've got to get used to it. I've got to get used to playing with her. But, like I said, so far, not quite my favorite ship so far. So, what does she look like on paper? Well, on paper, she has 46,400 hit points, which, if you look back to the Tier 3 Nassau, which is the ship that I just absolutely love, it only has 35,000 hit points. So the Kaiser has almost 11,000 more hit points than the Tier 3 Nassau does. So it's got some survivability. I took quite a few torpedo hits in my last battle that I played in it, and it actually stuck through it pretty well. It actually took 3 salvos of torpedoes to sink this ship. So it's got 46,400 hit points, which gives it 19 to 350 millimeters of armor. 350 millimeters protecting the citadels down below here. And its torpedo reduction damage goes from 14% on the Nassau to an actually pretty good 22% at Tier 4. So that's the survivability. So if we look at the artillery, again, we have 5 of these 305 millimeter guns. Now, they are big guns. Big guns. At 305 millimeters, but like I said, they're kind of laid out really weird, and with as slow as the turrets turn around, you can actually get killed pretty darn quick if you don't time your turns right. Now, the secondary armament, you have 4 of these 88 millimeter guns. It's a pretty big improvement over the secondary armament of the Nassau, and then you also have 14 of these 150 millimeter guns, which are pretty big artillery shells. I've actually had these guys open up a couple of times, and yeah, they do some damage, I'm not gonna lie, especially if you can get facing broadside. So if we go back to the AA defense, now the AA defense, This refit was actually done because I've got the ship completely uploaded, and it was done when airplanes became a viable threat. So the AA defense has been severely increased over the Nassau. They have these 17 of these 20 millimeter flak 38 cannons, flak 38 guns. They fire the flak guns. It also has 5 of these 30 millimeter, 37 millimeter Flak-Zwillig, which is another, look at that beast of a gun. It's got dual barrels on it. So they're kind of cool. So it's got 10 of those altogether, and then it has 4 of the 88 millimeter. The secondary armament can be turned into anti-aircraft guns. It's actually pretty maneuverable. We go from 20 knots completely uploaded at the Nassau to 23 knots completely uploaded or upgraded with the Kaiser, and its turning circle is actually quite a bit bigger, and it actually has a slower rudder shift. The Nassau had a 11-second rudder shift, and the Kaiser has a 13-second rudder shift. So it's not too shabby, but it is what it is. Oh, and the artillery too. I can actually fire out at 14.5 kilometers at this, where when you can, my concealment is actually 14.2. So realistically, I can actually shoot them before they see me. Now, it's not much of a difference. If you don't already have your guns pointed in that way, they're going to see you, but they're going to see you just as your guns open up on them. So that's kind of actually cool, and it's got a 10.5 kilometer detectability range by air. So unlike the Nassau, where I just got lucky, jumped into a game, and you guys saw a glorious first game in the Nassau, I have played a couple of games in the Kaiser, and like I've said, not really a fan, but I think I've just got to get used to it. Especially, you know, maneuvering my ship so that I can get these guns facing the right ways. If you do it usually about a half rudder, by the time you get turned around, you will have the guns facing the direction you want. But if you do it at a full left or full right rudder, you are facing the other way and going the other direction before your guns have even passed the halfway point. It's actually a pretty quick little ship. So that's it on paper. That's what it looks like on the stats. So what is it like in battle? Well, let's take it into a couple of battles and let's see what's happening. Okay, so here we are in the Nassau, and I actually have been beating my head off the wall all day long trying to get a good game in this ship. And this game was by no means any good, but it was less bad than the other ones. The ship reminds me of the Colorado a lot. I just don't do well with it. I don't like it. So this game starts off pretty good, and it kind of unravels pretty quick. But you'll see that as we get going here. We'll get it up to speed. So you kind of see like how bad the turret traversion on this ship is, and just the weird way that they've got the turret set up. It's kind of weird because it's got a turret on both the port and the starboard side of the ship. And what's funny is that if I've got my turrets aimed to, like for example, we're going to switch over to the port side of the ship here, and you'll see the turrets all swing around. And what ends up happening is the turret that will be on the starboard side of the ship will literally be pointed at the back of the turret on the port side of the ship. So the turret swings all the way around and points in that direction, but you can't fire it. You can't use it. So it's completely useless. So then you have to change directions or something, and you got to point the turrets to the other side of the ship. And instead of having a turret that's already over there like the Nassau does, you have 2 turrets that are already there. You have to wait for that one turret to swing all the way around with the other turret. And it's kind of funny, but at the same time it's kind of maddening, and it's kind of, I don't know. It's kind of a whole different thing. So it takes a minute. We start spotting some enemies here, but it does take a minute or two for the game to really kind of pick up a little bit. You can see that Japanese battleship's already opening up there. Kind of some of the ships, and we get a couple that are coming towards the point that we're headed towards. I think it's A. And we end up taking them out pretty quick. We've got a destroyer in there capping the zone, and then we've got this very small fleet of a couple of battleships and a couple of cruisers steaming to the west, where we're going to intercept those two ships that are headed into the A cap point. And we're going to sink them. So luckily my turrets are all turned around. You can see that turret on the other side, the starboard side of the ship, is actually pointed at the other turret. It's knocked up against the forward superstructure, so it's all but useless as a turret. So we can get a couple of these ships in range, and I think that this cruiser here is the only one that we're going to really be able to shoot at. There's another ship in range, but he's hidden behind a mountain, and we'll get to him here in just a second. So let's put some shots out on this guy. Pow! Citadel penetration right off the bat. In fact, all those shots, only one of my shells hit, and it was a Citadel penetration. So basically what that says is that at this range, because it's plunging fire, meaning that it's arcing at its point and starting to come down, is that I went through his decks, and he's dead. So this is that battleship, and he's kind of chilling behind this island. The other ships are faster than I am, so they're starting to flush him out. He actually goes to the other side of the island, sails between the two islands, and that's where we end up getting him. And that is the only Citadel penetration that I achieved during this game. So automatically, right away, the game is going in my team's favor. We've got the first kill. We're about to control one of the points, and then we chase them out of B, and we immediately take control of B, and then the whole game just goes completely downhill from there. Which, like I said, you'll see that coming up. That comes up as soon as we all start steaming south. What's going on is that their ships, with the exception of a couple of ships, are clustered together. So they can concentrate large volumes of fire on a single target at a time. And yeah, they're being shot at from all directions, but they can take out ships very, very quickly. And this is actually a plan that works very well for them. Even though we thin out their ranks, they thin ours out faster. So we're coming around this corner, and this battleship that's there starts steaming between those two islands, and so I kind of turn over, and we're gonna take a couple of shots at him as he comes through. We're gonna slow down here in just a second to wait for him to come through that island, because I don't have a shot at anything else. But I will say that the one thing that's good about having those two turrets on the starboard and port sides of the ship is that when I'm facing a target, or when I'm coming right at a target, here he comes, he's going to poke out, is I actually have 6 guns trained instead of just the 2 or just the 4. So there he is. We put shots out on him. Let him just a little bit too much, but we score a couple of hits. Nothing real major, but we're going to start pecking away at him. And immediately you can see the incoming fire from the large group of enemy ships. For some reason, that battleship looks like it's firing high explosive shells, and so the dive bombers take him out. That's cool. But that battleship in front of me looks like he's firing high explosive shells, which is kind of no bueno, because they do the most damage when they light the target on fire. But if your shells don't have a high percentage chance of lighting the target on fire, then... So we'll put some shots out at this other Kaiser here, score a couple of hits. But there's just a large group of like 3 or 4 of them, and this is where it kind of becomes a brawl. And it's really about, we'll have to see who wins, but they sink several of our ships in very quick succession. The battle itself right now is just going back and forth. There's nobody's winning, nobody's really losing. So we'll put some more shots out on this guy just from our 2 front turrets, and then that side turret comes back up, so we'll put another shot out on him. But I kind of like the way this Nassau looks a little bit. When he's a little bit closer. They are both showing me the broadsides. And this kind of shows you... Now remember, the Kaiser is a higher tier ship than the Nassau is. And so this gives you an idea of how much damage the Nassau can take. How much punishment that ship can take. A couple of hits on that Kaiser there. few more shots out from those side turrets. There we go. A couple of hits on him, but nothing spectacular. We're not really doing large amounts of damage to these guys. And this should have been made a whole lot easier. Keep an eye on that Kaiser that I've targeted right there. Just keep an eye on him, because he becomes a very big problem later. Oh, and that St. Louis just wasn't watching where he was going. But we have the carrier. We've already sank their carrier. So we have the only carrier in the game. So this should be just a little bit easier for us, but it's just, I don't know what happened in this battle, what caused it to go south so fast, to go so bad so quickly. Alright, so we're going to target that Kaiser right there. Shots out on him, they're looking good, but that shell dispersion is terrible. We're only scoring a hit here and there, and you'll even see it point blank range. You know, in my New Mexico, when I get up close to those targets the way I do in this game, I would have been scoring citadel after citadel after citadel. And in this game, I just don't. So there's a destroyer up there in that smoke cloud, but I'm not really all that worried about him. Keep an eye on that St. Louis as well. Right there. That little guy. I put some shots out on him, but I think that just makes him mad. Because he kind of comes back to haunt me later. So we're headed right at an island, so we've got to turn. Come on. The guns do reload pretty quick, though. And so that's it. They've sank the other battleship that was right next to me. I'm literally all by myself right now. And they start hammering. And this is where the whole thing goes belly up for me. Okay, so we finished him off. We're going to turn and try to get out of here. They've lit me on fire. I'm firing two places, so I'm going to use my damage repair consumable. I normally don't do that. I normally let my battleship burn, because I have so much health that a burning battleship isn't really that big of a deal. So there's that Nassau, and then there's a St. Louis that's hammering me from the back there. So watch how much damage this ship takes from me. Watch how many salvos. And so he's lit me on fire again. But watch how many salvos that Nassau takes from me. The ship is a brawler. And there's a Nassau right next to me. You can see him up against the island there. And watch what happens. Another salvo. Out. Pow. I score some huge hits on him, but I don't do any damage. So right now I'm not burning. I'm on fire. There's actually a St. Louis behind me, but I am so focused on this stupid Nassau that I don't even bother with him. I'm just like, oh my god. At this point, it became like a personal vendetta. Look at the amount of fire coming in on this little ship. He hasn't even targeted me yet. The only thing that's been shooting at me is that St. Louis. And I've just put more shots into him. And that's it for the cruiser that was in front of us that was putting shots in. Now they've both targeted, both the Nassau and the St. Louis behind me have targeted the Nassau that's off to my side. And I slowed down thinking, oh, well, I'll just stay behind this island here. And I really shouldn't have done that, but it really doesn't matter. More shots into that Nassau, several hits, no damage whatsoever. And here in just a second, that Nassau next to me is going to go up in smoke. There he goes. I am all by myself right now on the southern half of the map, facing down a Nassau battleship that I have put more than half a dozen salvos into, and it hasn't done any damage to him. So my secondary batteries are opening up. They're starting to light this guy up a little bit, starting to score some hits. They've lit me on fire again. More shots out, still no damage. This Nassau is a tough, tough ship. In a time span of about 1.5 minutes to 2 minutes, I have gone from full health to less than half. It's just totally ridiculous, the amount of damage that this Nassau takes. So I've got to get all guns firing at him. So I turn in just a hair and start lighting him up with my secondaries. I'm hoping to catch him on fire, but it's just not working. More shells into the Nassau, and he is still standing. That St. Louis is pounding me from the stern, and you can just see that my ship is in some serious trouble. And this is why I don't like this ship. It's actually ridiculously weak. Look at how much health I have left. It's just totally ridiculous. And that So the Nassau, and this is the one saving grace, is that the Nassau's put himself up against the island and I take him out. But there's that stupid St. Louis that's been hammering me. So I'm going to put some shots into him. So right now, the only people left on our team, you remember how organized and well done it looked? The only people left on our team is me and the carrier. I take aim, put some last-ditch shots out, and boom, I'm gone. But that's not the end of this battle. All my shots miss. Bummer. So now it's just the carrier left. We've got 2 cap points. They're getting ready to move into 1. Our carrier, remember, when the carrier is playing the game, he's not looking at it from a third-person perspective like we are. He's looking at it from a top-down kind of tactical map. So what you're seeing right now is not what the carrier's seeing. And he's sending his planes out to different things. Well, the carrier has a very specific loadout. Once the carrier runs out of airplanes, it runs out of airplanes. So those are the dive bombers. They're coming back to the carrier. We're gonna snap up to the torpedo bombers. He's only got 3 left, because those are like ammunition. Once the carrier runs out of planes, he's done. He can't do anything else. And the carrier actually does a good job of surviving, but when it comes to aiming, this guy, he's just terrible. He launches like 2 or 3 sets of torpedoes at the Wyoming class battleship, and he misses all but one of the torpedoes. And you know, he focuses his dive bombers instead of focusing on 2 targets. And of course, it's really easy in hindsight for me to sit here and criticize what this guy did, but at this point the battle was lost, and either they were going to win by points, they were going to kill him and win that way. The battle was completely lost. There was nothing a lone carrier with minimal fighter and torpedo and bombers could really do. So we got these torpedo bombers coming in. He's going to attack the Wyoming, which is actually in B right now. It's capped B, and it's moving off towards A because they're pretty much unopposed. They don't have to worry about ships. The only threat that they have is coming from the air. Now, the Wyoming doesn't have great anti-aircraft support because of the time frame when the ship was built. So this should be pretty easy for him. But he's coming over this island here, and we're just going to kind of follow this. Now, he's not controlling these planes. He's not like flying them. It's just, he's just pointing and clicking on a map, and that's one of the reasons why I don't like to play carriers. It's because I don't like point and click tactical gameplay. So the torpedo bombers turn in, and when they swoop down like that, then turn around, he's launched the torpedo. So he's got 3 torpedoes in the water, because that's all he's got left, is 3 torpedo bombers, and only 1 hits. The 1 hits on the bow, and the other 2 sail harmlessly past him. Now the one on the stern just barely missed him. But here comes those dive bombers. They're headed back to the carrier after making another bombing run on that cruiser, the St. Louis, that sank me. Just kind of fly around and wait here for just a second. You can see a ship sinking off in the distance. It's kind of an interesting perspective, looking at the game from the perspective of these planes. So I'm going to watch the planes come in and land on the carrier. Just because it gives you a different viewpoint of the map. It gives you a different viewpoint. So what he's doing is he's turning over, and this island that's off to his starboard here, off to the right-hand side of the ship, he's going to hide behind that. Because he can still launch planes, but they can't arc their shops up over the island to get to him. So his dive bombers are back in the air, and he's going to go after that St. Louis. But the problem that you run into is that they light fires on the St. Louis, and then by the time the St. Louis pops his repair consumable, and the fighters go land on the deck of the carrier and then take off, rearm, and then take off again, his repair consumable is completely back up. So he's gone the 15-second duration of the repair consumable, and then gone through the 1:45 recharge time. So they're doing damage to him, but they're not doing any long-lasting damage. So they kind of swirl around, and then you'll see him turn around sharply, and that's when they hit back. Boom, he hits him. But they don't light him. They light him on fire, but he immediately uses that repair consumable and or his damage control, and puts the fire out. So they're doing a little bit of damage to him, but they're not doing a lot of damage. And the same thing with these torpedo bombers, same thing. He gets a little closer, kind of screws up the approach because you do have to put it up, but you know, one torpedo hits and the other two sail harmlessly past the Wyoming. And he just lost a torpedo bomber, so now he's only got 2. And you know, he's putting up a heck of a fight. I've seen carrier captains where they get to this point where they're all alone and they think they've lost and they just sail towards the enemy and kill themselves, and you know, it's kind of ridiculous. So his bombers are landing and they're rearming and doing their bomber thing. He's kind of sailing away from the island. He's just trying to get away from them, which he's not going to because the Langley is not a very fast carrier.
Our victory is in sight.
1, 2, and we'll switch back over. So these are the fighters. He's got a couple fighters, and what he's doing is he's using those fighters to keep the Wyoming and the St. Louis spotted, so that he doesn't ever lose sight of them. So the fighters aren't going to do anything. They're not going to rake the decks with gunfire and kill crew. That's not how it works. You remember when I said that all the different ships have detectability by sea and detectability by air? Well, that's what that is the fighters are staying within a certain distance of them, staying outside the course of their, outside the range of their AA, and just keeping them spotted. So the dive bombers come in, and this is kind of interesting. It's almost like he knew, right? So they're going after the St. Louis, and they dive bomb him, light him on fire from the bombs, and then we'll switch back over to the torpedo bombers because he's actually sent the torpedo bombers after the St. Louis. But the way he did it is he fired from the front. So one torpedo hits the St. Louis. One. Look at the other one. It's going to completely miss. And he then uses his damage, his repair ability, stops the flooding, puts the fire out, and continues on about his day. So we're going to kind of zoom in on the St. Louis, because the St. Louis is a great ship as far as a cruiser goes. But yeah, I mean, he's got a lot of damage to him, but look at how much health he's got. He's still pretty healthy as far as a ship that's been bombed 3 times and torpedoed once. I mean, that should have killed anybody. So either the St. Louis driver is awesome or our carrier sucks. But at this point, we're watching the St. Louis sail off into the sunset because the game's going to come to an end. They win on points. So we put into the chat, you know, hey, good game, guys, good game. Just being some good sports. But, yep. And there goes the dive bombers, but it's too little too late. And they win, we lose. But all in all, it wasn't too bad of a game. 122,000 credits, 1,100 XP, 59 free XP. We got 2 kills, 1 citadel, scored a bunch of hits. Our secondary battery scored a ton of hits in that battle with the NAS.